Everything is recording. And go ahead, Paul, you can go ahead and take it over.
All righty. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be with all of you today. My name is Paul Evans. I work for the University of Florida's Croc research team, and today we're going to be going over non-native large reptiles here in Florida. We are stationed out in Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Center. We work all over the state from about as far north as St. Lucie, all the way towards around kind of Cape Coral through to Naples and all the way down to Key West. We are a different kind of camaraderie of biologists, researchers, managers, and outreach specialists working particularly with herpetofauna. So that's reptiles, that's amphibians. And obviously, as our name says, Croc docs, we do a lot of work with crocodilians, not just here in South Florida, but throughout the Caribbean as well. A little overview of what we're going to be touching on today. We're going to go over what is the problem and why we care about this problem, being non-native and or invasive species, specifically reptiles and large constrictors, going over the different types of management that's actively being done both by my organization as well as our partners and other agencies down here. The importance and the need for citizen scientists, as well as the identification and reporting processes for a lot of these different species. So what is the problem? Primarily, the problem is we have a lot more of introduced species than we have ever had at any other time. There are more introduced species here in Florida than anywhere else in the world when it comes to herpetofauna. So as you can see, up until 2015, there have been 185 known and valid introduced species. So introduced means it is a species that's not from here, that had at least one sighting or one occurrence where it was let loose either on purpose or accident into the wild. If some of these species are able to stay introduced and continue functioning as they would ecologically, so moving through the environment, possibly looking or seeking out others of the same species, and eventually reproducing and growing a population, that is when they would become established. And once a species is established, that's when they really become a larger threat here in Florida. As you can see, 63 of those 185 species, so over a third, are successfully introduced, which means they're breeding, they're active, they're distributing to different parts of Florida, and they are becoming more and more of a problem. So why is Florida gathering so many of these invasive and non-native species? A lot of this is going to be because we have kind of the perfect combination of developmental ports. So we're having a lot of large and various industries from all across the world come here, and there can be, purposeful trading, whether it's through ornamental plants or exotic pet trade, it can be accidental, where it's just stowaways, as well as we have a subtropical climate. The majority of Florida does not have this full subtropical climate. You can get more into a temperate tropical climate, you can get more into a very humid, temperate forest, but you're not necessarily going to get into this real subtropical climate besides down here in South Florida. And then of course, throughout the Keys, where we move more to a neotropical climate. So these areas in particular are set up to really be very active habitats for a lot of these exotic species. The majority of exotic species come from places like the Amazon, Southeast Asia, Central Africa, as well as parts of Oceania. These areas have some of the most widest biodiversity in the world, and they are ecologically similar to Florida, specifically down here where all of us live, which is why so many of them have been able to come here. We have more non-native reptiles and amphibians than anywhere else in the world. If you've ever seen a lizard or a gecko, 63% of those lizard species or gecko species you've seen, they're non-native. They are not actually from here. does not mean they're all inherently bad. So non-native and invasive, those two terms you'll hear me say quite a bit. An invasive species is a non-native species that has had known threats and ongoing threats to either humans, to environmental or economical processes, while a non-native species is simply a species that is here living and functioning, but is not always going to have a huge threat. As well as here in Florida, the two largest species of snake are invasive. So we don't really have a lot of species natively that are actually even going to get up to those types of sizes. This graph here, this is called an invasion curve. This is what we use, many managers, many researchers use to better understand how an invasion or an introduction of one species or one occurrence of several individuals can lead to millions of dollars, as well as lots and lots of years being invested into solving the problem. So ideally, right around where it's orange, so right in the containment area, is where we really would like to get more attention to people understanding these animals are here. Because the further down or closer to the start of an introduction that we can get more people to care or understand about invasive species or non-native species, the closer we can actually eradicate, instead of having to focus more on containment or long-term management, which is what we have to do with things like the Burmese python. It does not mean necessarily that there is not ever going to be a way to fully contain or eradicate some of these species that have been here 20 to 30 years, but it does mean it's going to take a lot of time and energy and consistency in those efforts to eventually get to where that could become more of a possibility in the future. So invasive species, as I mentioned, they are an ongoing threat. They primarily here in South Florida are a big problem because they're out competing as well as actually predating on a lot of our native wildlife. Many of these native species are larger predators that typically did not evolve to have to be more of a problem when it comes to being predated upon. Things like a Florida panther, things like a bobcat, and American alligator. For the most part, when they get to a certain size, there shouldn't be too many things that naturally are going to take them out. But when we introduce things like a Burmese python, this is when you have essentially a new apex predator coming in and causing several problems. They also cause problems by bringing in diseases and parasites. There is a lung parasite brought over through Burmese pythons that has impacted several different types of native snake species. Some of these snake species actually can live in, I think, almost all of the lower continental United States, although they have not made it further north than Gainesville. This has only been really investigated and observed for about 4 years now. So in the next several years, we definitely could see some of those snake species pass along that parasite and it become not just a Florida problem or a regional problem, but possibly throughout most of North America. This is becoming a problem in terms of the large Everglades restoration program, because we're doing all this work to reroute canals to ensure that American crocodiles and American alligators are bouncing back from population collapses in the last century. And then we're having these problems where we're going to have a very healthy or more healthy wetlands ecosystem in the Northern Everglades and through the rest of the actual Everglades system. But primarily, a lot of it's going to be for these invasive and non-native species if we're not able to continue to manage it properly. So why should we care? A lot of this is going to be because of what they're doing to our native species. If you guys see this graphic, this was a graphic made by South Florida Water Management District. It's one of our partner agencies. And this is using diet analysis data to basically look at what a Burmese python would need to eat in its first 5 to 7 years. So kind of during its main growing period towards kind of adulthood. what it would have to eat. And as you can see, it's a lot of native rodents. It's small subadult alligators and several of our ground or shore nesting birds. There have been 39 species of shorebirds or wetland birds that have been found inside Burmese pythons. So this is a really big problem because obviously Burmese pythons are not the only non-native constrictor. We'll talk about a lot of those other ones later, but we also have non-native lizards such as the Argentine black and white tegu, as well as the Nile monitor, which are animals we actively are monitoring and trying to analyze their diet. And we've also found other species that are being impacted, things like reptile eggs or alligator nests, things like this, where we're having smaller reptiles or smaller animals run into problems. So if you can see here, there's large impacts that are popping up for a lot of these species, as well as this is becoming an economical problem. Some of these non-native species are a very big problem for safety measures. So seawalls in Palm Beach and other parts of South Florida have been having problems due to iguanas, agamas, other types of these non-native animals that are going to dig under and actually cause it to crack, as well as obviously a lot of tourism takes place in Florida. And not a lot of people want to come here to see really really large, scary animals sometimes, rather than coming to see the really beautiful natural species that have lived here for millions of years. So pythons and large constrictors, as you can see, they are large. Honestly, most of the animals we get brought in now are around probably honestly 16 and a half feet. So I truthfully should get people out there and we should get a more updated photo. But yeah, you find them over that 15, 16, 17 foot range pretty commonly now, in terms of if you are to find a big one. And a lot of these tend to be big females. So after that 13 foot kind of maturity cap, that's when they're going to start to put on even more mass. And that's when they will move to be some of these large ones I'm sure you guys have seen or heard about in the news. Some of those species of concerns we have noticed is going to be the wood sturk and key Largo wood rat. So these are particularly already protected and listed federally, whereas Cape Sable, seaside sparrow, Florida panther, and American crocodile, they are listed and protected species. It has not been confirmed in a diet analysis yet that any of these animals have been predated upon, but due to niche similar prey items such as bobcat or American alligator, or similar environments, we can assume that likely these animals at one point as a species have felt the impact of a lot of these non-native species. A lot of our management challenges that come into this is that it's very hard for us to understand how many there truly are. There are many methods in trying to do research and manage these species, but a lot of it comes down to wanting to still understand how many have actually successfully made it to different areas. So a lot of the questions we try to solve in our research is distribution. Where they tend to be are areas that are pretty remote. They're not going to be places you can easily get into outside of possibly airboat, or really just trudging through the mud on foot, as well as they naturally have a very low detectability. So it's roughly under, I want to say 0.5%, I believe, for you to really actually find one, because they're very good at camouflaging. In this bottom photo, there are actually 2 different snakes there, and it's very hard to pick out both of them because of that natural camouflage they have built in, as well as they are an ambush predator. So they're not always going to be on the move. Which is why most of the time when people do find them is when they have to cross either roads or cross levees. So a lot of the research that's being done, as I said, is trying to understand more about their distribution and more about where these animals actually are. So with many species that are rare or cryptic, so species that are going to have a very low presence, at least a visual presence, we want to use things like eDNA. This is environmental DNA. This is something that we want to basically test water, even soil samples in some areas, especially in these wetlands, and see if there have been a presence of Burmese pythons, of Asian water monitors moving through those areas. So we know that we need to survey and have more greater kind of observations occurring in that area, get more eyes on the ground in that area. We also have had partners who use detector dogs. So this has been very successful down in Key Largo. Basically, it's a drug dog, but instead of looking for drugs, it's looking for snakes, and they're trained. And basically just are able to find where in the brush Burmese pythons are hanging out, and then we are able to have people go with them. It's a whole team effort to go and remove the animals at that time. There's also things like scout snake projects. So we participate in this now, and this is having radio tracking devices. It could be satellite, it could be GPS, as well as it is always going to be VHF. So those are going to be different types of signals that we can use to pick up on locations of snakes, because we put a little device inside them. And a lot of this is so we can find not just where their movement, but as well as find where breeding aggregations are. So the breeding habits of Burmese pythons tend to be kind of a sex ball of snakes, if you will. There can be multiple males, typically only one male. Typically only one female, because she is going to be a lot larger. And this can occur anytime from December to April. And the whole point of this is if we're able to go in and find a female during breeding aggregations, you can remove multiple mature and actively reproductive males. That's going to definitely be helping us kind of take that top layer of the population off that tends to be causing a lot of ecological problems. As well as some of our partners with USGS has done good work with scout snake projects with babies, so using hatchlings. And we've actually found a lot of native species like cottonmouth, various raptors, so hawks, different kites, as well as a few different small alligators have eaten hatchling Burmese pythons. And it's very interesting to see some of these native species kind of start to come to the forefront, as well as various types of large reptile traps. These are really interesting traps because it has paced out and different weighted metal platforms that if they are not hit at the same time, which means it has to be a certain size of an animal, they can be like 8 or 10 foot long traps. So it really is only made for very large snakes to go into. So it's been very helpful in also working on removing reptile efforts. But obviously, I'm sure many of you have heard of this. The Python contractor program has led for us to have and see the greatest removal effort. 6,000 have been removed as of 2020. Since then, you could probably add about another 3,100, I believe. So we're getting close to about almost 10,000 as a combined effort from the South Florida Water Management, as well as FWC's combined python removal projects. Some people, this has now become their full job, and they work very tirelessly to remove a lot of these animals, and it has been very, very helpful. And not just us understanding where a lot of these animals are, but as well as removing more of them and getting more people involved, which is always good, always helpful for us to get more eyes and ears on the ground. If anyone in this chat is interested in possibly becoming a Python contractor or learning more about how to kind of start getting that ball rolling and removing or learning how to handle, I will have more details about FWC's programs for that at the end of this. But I always want to mention that in case that is of interest to anyone. So then lastly, one of the most important things with this type of invasion ecology is going to be citizen science. all of you live in different places than where I live. You go to different places than I go to, or any other managers or researchers. And there are numerous gaps in invasive species that could be filled by information a lot of you guys have. If you see things in your backyard or throughout your daily life, it's important that you guys understand that there are ways for you to report and pass along that information that may be helping managers or other biologists rapidly respond to invasive species. So what should you maybe look for when you're out and about? What maybe are things that we should keep our eyes out for as signs for some of these large constrictor activity? A lot of the times, as we said, roads and levees is where you're going to find a lot of these species pop up. They tend to leave a large tail drag, especially in the wet season when we get more mud. It's just gonna be a big, long, concave line. It's one of those things where, unfortunately, nowadays, you kind of gotta really be mindful wherever you are. They've been found in garages, inside. I think someone found it in a car engine a few years back, trying to stay warm during winter. Grocery stores, a whole lot of different places they can pop it up. And a lot of this is because it's a pretty hardy animal. As long as it has a close proximity to fresh water, it's going to be all right. They've done well in disturbed and natural areas, whole different types of wetlands, grasslands, temperate forests, et cetera, really anywhere down here in South Florida. If they're able to have a semi-reliable food resource and have water nearby, they're going to do pretty well. When could you look, or when maybe could you expect to have a better understanding of when these animals are more active? Well, it could be day or night, but a lot of the times when we do tend to see more of these animals to be active is going to be early mornings. A lot of this is when the sun's starting to come up, kind of between about 3 to about 7 a.m. That's why you'll have a lot of contractors or researchers who are working on these projects. A lot of them are going to be working more along those hours. And then obviously in cooler months, or when we have a cold snap like we did, I think it was just about 3 weeks ago, that really cold weekend, times like that is when they're going to want to go into shallow water or canals, because they're going to be able to better regulate their body temperature in a lower type of aquatic environment. While in summer, they're kind of going to want to move a bit more. They're not going to want to just sit and bake in the heat as much. As it going to get warmer, they want to make sure they're able to disperse that warmth into something like a paved road and kind of move through so they don't overheat. So with obviously large non-native constrictors, as well as large non-native reptiles, we're going to have a lot of really big animals. I think the smallest one we're going to talk about today is maybe 4 feet in length, where a lot of these animals will be over 10 feet. There's a whole variety of patterns, as well as many different names, and unfortunately, some native species who also get mistaken for them. So Burmese python, obviously this is probably the one you all will be most familiar with. It has likely been here since the early 1990s. Adults tend to get up to about 18 feet and about 150 pounds, not including what's in their gut. They have been found to be, I think the largest is 212 or 215 pounds. So they can get very, very large. They're going to have a big, dark brown to darkish black arrow head shape as a wedge going directly on the back of their head, leading into a dorsal pattern that's going to be almost like a puzzle piece or a giraffe pattern, where you could almost just squish all the parts together and they would line up pretty nicely. If you were at night and walking around with a flashlight, they would have a reflection that would come off as almost glossy, and that is something that we will see with several of these large constrictors. Unfortunately, as they are invasive, that does mean they have established. They are all over South Florida, as you can see from this map. These are where various reports from agencies, public citizens have came through. And as you can see, they really have had a lot of success in moving through parts of South Florida, but tend to have not made it too far north just yet. North African python, they are invasive, but they've only really had a localized population in part of Miami-Dade. They tend to be more smaller than the Burmese python, only topping out around 12 to 13 feet. They're going to have a lighter brown and more of a grayish kind of hue overall. And unlike having that really nice complexion of giraffe-like pattern, they're going to kind of have more of a watercolor kind of just sloped together back pattern. They're going to have a dark and a light wedge going directly under their eyes. And they will also have a glassy appearance when they are reflecting off light or a flashlight. If you are to look at their tail here, you can see that it's curved up like a cinnamon. So they will actually use that as a defensive mechanism and kind of use it as a form of almost distracting whatever it's trying to defend itself from. So it could actually strike its attacker and then keep moving on with its day and get to safety. So this is the area within Miami-Dade where there have been some found. For a while, it was thought that possibly eradication or ultimate containment had fully happened here. And then about a year ago, 4 more 9 to 10 footers were found. They were removed, of course, but that definitely does mean there are more that are popping through this area. So that area is still being surveyed, and I believe is going to have a large survey effort in just the next month. Common boa constrictor. This is an invasive species as well, only having a localized population in Miami-Dade. They can get up to 10 feet, but truthfully, that is more of a rarity. They did find a 10-foot, I think 90-pound one just up in St. Lucie last October. As you can see, they're going to have just a singular line going down the back of their head. They're not going to have that giant wedge shape. And they're going to have a nice tan oval type saddles going down to a more reddish brown oval saddle going towards the tail. And instead of having a glossy appearance when they are reflecting off the light, they're going to appear almost soft or fuzzy, visually at least, compared to those other species. Now, as you can see in this part of Miami-Dade is where we're going to have that localized population. So there have been nests, there have been juveniles found, while a lot of the other areas throughout the state where they've popped up, a lot of it has to do with pet trade. This is still an animal that was found in pet trade pretty heavily. It's semi-arboreal, so a lot of the times people are finding them. It's usually just up in trees, up in rafters, and a lot of it in these major cities likely is a pet escapee. Ball pythons, not established. They are the smallest snake we're going to talk about today at 2 feet, being kind of the low end and reaching out more about 4. As you can see, they kind of have that nice dark complexion as well, but a lot of that does not matter because with how heavy they have been passed through the pet trade, they are a large variety of colors. They could be orange, purple, gray, blue. There are tons of varieties that they have been bred for. They are extremely popular in the pet trade, as well as they are very valuable. Some of these individual snakes, depending on the different morphs, as well as the different colors that people have been able to produce through the pet trade, some of these animals can go for thousands of dollars, and definitely is one of the reasons why they have taken off so much as a pet item. That is why you will find so many of them as releases or escapees in various major cities. And not too many of them are really out and about in other parts of, we'll say, like nature, in these other habitats or environments that some of these other large constrictors have taken to. And a lot of that's their size. It's probably going to be pretty hard for this smaller constrictor, especially since it's extremely arboreal, to really survive too successfully in parts of Florida. Germa wills burrow boa, it is going to be not established. So this one has popped up a few times, but it is on the prohibited list. So several of these other species we're going to get to, they are prohibited. So that does mean there are protections that are in place now and regulations to stop importation and stop and kind of manage and regulate parts of who can have these animals, where and why. These ones tend to be on the smaller side, but they do have the possibility to get up to almost 10 feet. As you can see, they are going to also be in that tannish brown kind of hue. And a lot of their saddles are going to be very irregular. And they will have more of that soft or fuzzy appearance when light is shining upon them as well. This is the yellow anaconda. It is a smaller, pretty aquatic snake. Instead of having a wedge on the top of their head, it's going to have either 4 to 5 lines starting just behind the eye and moving to the back of the head into a dark pattern up against a green or almost yellow body. And then they're going to have pretty irregular dark hues all the way down the rest of their body. Green anaconda, same thing, not established. But definitely has popped up as an introduction once or twice in the last 30 years. A lot of this tends to be back when they were able to be a pet item. Again, same with yellow anaconda, they're extremely aquatic. So if you kind of see their eyes and their nose are closer to the front of their head, and that is because they are going to really focus in on kind of being able to just poke their head out of the water. That's part of the reason why the green anaconda has the most mass on average. So it is the largest snake in terms of weight, and it's going to use a lot of that weight to survive being in a very aquatic system, as they do live and are from the Amazon. As you can see, they're going to have a darkish hue of spots on the top that are going to be more of a greenish or olive colored actual body. And then they're going to have highlights going directly under their eye and along their sides of almost a rusty orange. And then these guys, being a larger constrictor, are going to also have that glossy appearance as the reflection they give off. Scrub python, this is a very lean animal compared to a lot of these other pythons. They can be very, very long, but they do not often get quite that long. They're going to have a tan to gold type of hue for kind of like the base of their skin. You may notice on the back of their head, they don't have any particular design or pattern. That irregular banding is going to start directly at the back of their head and go down. And these guys will actually have an almost iridescent appearance when they are reflecting light. Reticulated python is going to be the longest in the wild on average snake. So they're not established, luckily for us. You may notice that they have a bright orange eye. That is definitely going to be the best identifier for these species, but the rest of them is going to fall more into that gold tan body, specifically with black kind of outlining these various blotches going down their dorsal or going down their back. And then these ones will also be iridescent. Some of our non-native reptiles that pop up. So Nile monitor, this is an established species. It's specifically established, so it's reproducing and it is actively distributing in parts of the state. It's going to be Charlotte, Hillsborough, Palm, and oddly enough, just Homestead Air Force Base. Just that area of Homestead has not made it too far out of there yet. As you can see, it's a pretty large animal, getting up to 5 to 6.5 feet. Given their name, the Nile monitor, being one of the largest rivers in the world, they're going to be one of the most aquatic lizards in the world. So their tail is going to be almost 1.5 times longer than their body. So that way they can use that to really maneuver some of these different aquatic areas. We've done a diet analysis on this species and found that amphibians and various aquatic species really tended to be the main impacts that they're having ecologically with a lot of our native species. So frogs, various clams, and other freshwater macroinvertebrates, especially with some of the smaller ones. So some shrimps, some fish, things like that were really what these guys were eating. And on the occasion, it had been some birds. Argentine black and white Tegu. These guys are only going to be about 3 to 4 feet. Obviously, black and white is going to be, it's in their name, but when they're hatchling, they're actually going to have a bright green head, which can lead people to not always identify them correctly, because there are several species of lizard that have a similar patterning when they are smaller as well. These are a long living species. They can get up to 15 or 20 years and can get up to sexual maturity within 2 to 3. So they definitely can have a very big impact. They have had an established population in Miami-Dade, Charlotte, and Hillsborough, and have also a population up in Georgia. That one is, for the most part, seemingly being contained and hopefully eradicated. There's been many positive signs. But the problem with this species is they can brumate. So that means they actually are able to kind of survive some of these longer winters and more northern parts of the United States, at least still in the South, kind of moving towards Virginia. They could hypothetically do pretty well there because they're able to dig themselves into a nice big burrow and hibernate of sorts for a couple months. So we actually here in South Florida, we will not really see a whole lot of animals once we get into October, November, and then really they don't come back out until about early to mid-February. So they will go into their structure here. The main problem we've noticed ecologically with these species is they love eggs. It can be birds, it can be alligators, it can be turtles, all different types of eggs they've been found to eat. And that's what a lot of people use to bait and trap and remove these animals too. Black spiny tail iguana. So if you've seen a green iguana, this is just going to be kind of its darker, edgier cousin, specifically having obviously a big spiky tail. So these guys are going to have more of a dark gray or black that kind of intertwines with occasionally a light gray going down its sides, but they're really pretty carnivorous. So they have had populations in Dade, Lee, and Charlotte, and there have been known impacts for both burrowing owls as well as gopher tortoises being predated on by this animal. The main problem, if you haven't noticed, is a lot of our native species are struggling to handle some of these non-native species being introduced. And a lot of that is because the way many of our native reptiles evolved, they evolved to play the role of kind of a mesopredator. So being able to be both a predator and a prey item. That allows kind of the natural balance in the food web of South Florida to function. Whereas when we are having this really large snake, being the Burmese python, come in and really get to eat just about everything, it has led to really hard times for a lot of our native species. Burmese pythons in the wild, they'll go through periods where they fast because the seasonal variations in parts of Southeast Asia are so drastic. They're not able to really find the food or find the food in the large enough numbers that they need. They don't have that problem here, which is why they are able to eat and go after and grow pretty quickly. Truthfully, at a certain size, a car or a human is really the only thing removing some of these animals. A lot of our native snakes, we don't always have the best relationship with them, but they're really good at helping us remove rodent populations, which can keep healthy crops, as well as stop the spread of disease in numerous areas. As you can see, some of our native lizards, they're small. They're very, very small. So when we're adding in things like a Nile monitor, stuff like this is going to truthfully be competing with something more akin to a fox or a coyote than it is any of our actual native lizard species, as well as some of our non-native lizard species like the brown anole from Cuba. It actually will, it's shown to have such impacts of green anoles that green anoles kind of live in the upper part of trees and brown anoles will be down in the bottom. So there's already been some, even on a very small scale, some changes ecologically that's occurred. Native water snakes are really important native species for us to have, but unfortunately, they tend to pop up in many environments where you could also find quite a few non-native species like the Burmese python. And many times when they are a mature animal, it's a pretty big snake. If you're not used to dealing with snakes, they can get into the 4, 5, 6 foot range, and they can be pretty girthy. So oftentimes they have been reported and killed as a Burmese python. And then when it comes to giving that information to researchers or managers, we sit there and we go, oh no. So it's very important for us to look at these animals and understand that they don't have a giraffe-like pattern. They're not going to have any of those dark wedges going through or under their eye like a lot of these non-native constrictors have. As well as if you guys kind of look at their head shape, it's kind of just going to be a very curved shape all the way through, even into the neck. Whereas Burmese pythons and many other python species, you're going to have a much more defined neck and lower jaw separation. Native king snakes, rat snakes, and racers, they're not really going to have a whole lot of misidentification, but it has happened due to how interesting some of these juvenile variations are. So the juvenile black racer, juvenile rat snake, as you can see, they have a very different color and hue than some of these larger snakes will have, or their adult forms will have. And they don't have any of those dark stripes going through their eyes, and they'd be playing with colors that you don't typically see. And then venomous and protected species. So many people are under the impression that if you see a large snake in the road, it's probably a Burmese python. You should just run it over. That is not what you should do, because a lot of the times, some of those really large animals are native species that are very important, or in the case of the eastern indigo, it's a protected species. It's already struggling in many of its habitats, especially down here in South Florida. So we definitely need to make sure that we are being careful for a lot of those animals. So it's going to be the only snake that gets close to the length in terms of native species of snake that get close to the length of Burmese pythons. Typically about 8 or 10 in the wild. There have been some larger individuals found, but that tends to be kind of the natural range. And then Eastern Diamondback and Cottonmouth. Obviously, they have those lines going through their eyes. Now, they're going to look very different than a Burmese python. Obviously, with a rattlesnake, it has its rattle. And a cottonmouth, besides being smaller than a Burmese python, is also, besides really predating on Burmese pythons, at least baby Burmese pythons, cottonmouths also are going to have behavioral differences. So they'll kind of stick their head up like this and kind of almost like a angry Newark Italian man, they'll kind of yell and do a little movement before they actually strike, which is not at all how our Burmese python is going to react when it's defending itself. It's going to curl into a ball and then start to prepare a strike. So obviously, a lot of this information today is trying to get more people to understand that if you were to see things out and about and you thought it was weird, there is a place to tell people, to help researchers, managers, as well as actually actively get people like the research team I work for at Croc Docs to come out and help possibly remove animals that are in your area that are new introductions, that are possibly new distributions of known species in different areas. And all this information is put into I've Got One. So this is an app, this is a website, it's a hotline, that's the hotline. And it all goes back to us. We get, information almost every single day. And if not us, FWC and many other biologists and wildlife research teams have access to all this information. The app was built through EdMaps and is a collaborative effort through UF, University of Georgia, FWC, as well as the National Parks Service. So if you also don't like snakes, you don't like lizards, they're not the thing you prefer looking at. Maybe you're a fisherman, maybe you are a gardener, and if you see things or you're noticing changes that are happening that you're not entirely sure, all that type of different information, different species will go to the right researchers and the right people that it needs to go to kind of just help us better understand all of the changes that are happening in this kind of battle with invasive species down here in South Florida. And that's just the other parts of the interface of the app. So yeah, thank you guys so much for having this discussion today. At this time, if you guys have any questions, that would be lovely. This is some of the links or different ways of some of the resources I talked about. So this is a QR code that you can use to get to the FWC Python training session. They do a virtual one every third Thursday of the month. And then I do believe at this listing, they will also tell you when and where they do them in person. This is the ESISMA website. So this is the big collaborative effort for us and our partners down here in regards to invasive species throughout the Everglades. So this can be different types of bees or termites, as well as plants, and even some different invasive rodents, all across the board, all taxa. And then this is the Croc Dogs website if you want to learn more of the other research and other projects that we are a part of.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. I know that there's quite a few of you still in this call. So if you guys do have questions, feel free to drop them into the chat and then I can tell them to Paul and he'll be able to see them too so he can answer any questions before he goes. It's so crazy to me seeing all those pictures of all those snakes, how many invasive snakes there are here in Florida. I'm from Texas and we don't have anything quite like what we have here. So it always just blows my mind to kind of put a visual to all of these things that you always hear people talking about and how detrimental they are to the environment. So it's cool to be able to see all the ways to ID them. Like I mentioned earlier, if you guys do want to refer back to anything that Paul talked about during the presentation, this recording will be on our YouTube channel. So it'll always be there. You'll be able to refer back if you find a snake and you're curious what it is. He had some really awesome pictures that you guys would be able to do that. And of course, report it through that app that he had mentioned as well. So I am not seeing any questions come through. So again, thank you, Paul, so much for taking time out of your day. I know that you had told me before we got on live with everyone that was here, but you guys are headed out into the field this afternoon, which is
I am
Can
off
you
in
tell
the
everybody
field.
briefly what y'all are going to do?
Sure. So this is our spring gator season. So we are going out to try to monitor the alligator population in parts of the Everglades system. So we go out, we do a population survey, and then a few times during the next couple of months, we're going to go and actually collect a few alligators. And by collect, I just mean we capture them, we put them on the boat, we take a bunch of morphometrics, sometimes we'll take blood samples, et cetera, and then we put them right back once we're done. It takes about 20 minutes, and it's just so we can better understand their health. We want to look at population structure, we want to look at the overall body condition, all as kind of ecological indicators for us to see how the Recover project and other restoration projects for the hydrology of the Everglades is impacting, ideally, positively, the alligator population.
That's awesome. There was a question that came through and it says, I work at a wetland in Boynton Beach. Do you think Burmese pythons can get up this way and be an issue?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, no, for sure. A lot of these snakes, kind of the new invasion front is how we refer to it as, is just around kind of Okeechobee and Waxahachie is kind of where we see the uppermost of where they could naturally be distribution on this side of the coast, at least currently. But definitely some of those other wetlands and stuff, as you move more towards the coast, there is a chance. It's probably not super active today, but obviously with climate changing and all various modeling does tend to support that, at least through most of the coasts up both sides, probably towards about Daytona on our side, there is a pretty good chance that these animals could naturally distribute up into. And obviously, if they're there, they can cause problems ecologically.
I know you probably saw the message too, but they said I'm at Green Cay, so close to Loxahatchee, and they thanked you for the info.
Oh, thank you guys. Yeah. I mean, that's why we kind of ask, keep your eyes out. Obviously, it's probably not something anyone's dying to see, but it is important that if you do see things, you are able to pass along that information because it really can be helpful if it's not just non-native constrictors. Like I said, it can be non-native plants, non-native worms or fish. All that stuff can be very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for presenting. Thank you for all of you who tuned in live. Feel free to share the recording whenever we do get it up on our YouTube channel. And then for everyone that is not familiar with South Florida Wildlife Center, again, we're the Wildlife Hospital here in Fort Lauderdale. We do post regularly on our social media channels with different things that we're doing here at our hospital with wildlife that we get that come in, as well as different events that we have coming up in the future. So stay tuned, stay up to date, and then we will see you guys hopefully for our next wild lecture series. Thank you so much, Paul, and I hope you have
Thank you guys.
good luck out in the field, find lots
Thank
of
you.
alligators, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You guys as well. Adios.
Thank you.